Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And over the past week, the US announced a fresh wave of tariffs on Chinese goods, reigniting global tensions on the ongoing trade war. But what does all of this actually mean for ordinary people in China?
Welcome to Dancing Japan. Let's dive in.
Let's start with exports. And China's direct and indirect export to the US amount to around 4 billion yuan per year. Sound huge, right? But in reality, that's only about 2% of China's total GDP. In other words, even if the trade war hits bilateral trade hard, the overall impact on China's economy is relatively limited. And it's worth noting China has already been reduced its reliance on the US trade and diversifying its industries and export markets well before this escalation. That said, it's not like China wants to end this conflict. The country is already grappling with serious internal challenges, like a prolonged real estate turndown, mounting local government debt, and also stubbornly high youth unemployment. Against this backdrop, it's clear that Beijing would prefer to avoid a full-blown trade confrontation with the US. But at the same time, the Chinese government has taken a firm stance, making it clear that it won't bow to what it calls bullying. Just recently, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and stated that China and EU should jointly resist unilateral buying practices. Sanchez responded by saying that U.S. China trade tensions should not get its way of China's cooperation with Europe. In fact, China and EU are currently discussing replacing car tariffs with a minimum pricing mechanism, potentially easing concerns over the so-called dumping. Beyond the EU, she is also planning visits Malaysia, Vietnam, and Cambodia. China is engaging its deeper trade talks with countries like South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and also India. The message is clear. China is not isolated. It still has plenty of options. Back at home, and many export-driven businesses are definitely feeling the pressure, and especially manufacturers that focuses heavily on the US market. With fewer orders, some may be forced to cut costs or even lay off workers. And yes, that's painful for the people directly affected. But the Chinese government has a track record of stepping in during the period like this, through subsidies, infrastructure investment, and also the boosting domestic demand to cushion the blow. So, will regular Chinese consumers suddenly find everything more expensive? Probably not. The most foreign brands sold in China, like Apple iPhones or Tesla vehicles, are made locally, so they're not affected by import tariffs. Ironically, it's American consumers who are more likely to feel the pinch, as higher tariffs drive up the cost of a Chinese-made product in US stores. China imports about 20 million tons of soybeans from the US every year, and if tariffs push up the cost by, let us say, 500 renminbi per ton, it could increase the price of things like chicken, pork, and the cooking oil. But even here, China has been preparing around 70% of its soybeans now come from Brazil, and other raw materials like propane are also being sourced more broadly. In tech sector, the Chinese domestic alternatives for low and mid-range chips are already pretty mature. As for high-end chips, the US has already imposed restrictions long before this. So, the latest tariffs won't change much. For now, there is no sign that consumer electronics like smartphones, laptops, or smart home devices will see any major price hikes. At this point, the back-and-forth tariffs between China and the US are starting to feel more like symbolic rather than substantial. Trade between the two countries has already shrunk significantly, and many analysts believe these tit-for-tat moves are mostly political posturing. In fact, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning recently posted an old video clip of Chairman Mao during the Korean War, where he declared, "No matter how long this war lasts, we will never yield." She captioned it, "We are Chinese, we are not afraid of provocation, we won't back down." That's a strong message, but more than anything, it's aimed at reassuring the domestic audience that the country is united and resilient. Meanwhile, China is still actually seeking international partnership to give its economy more room to breathe. So, from the perspective of an ordinary Chinese citizen like me, I think it's fair to say nobody wants to see US and China tension continue to spiral. Trade at its core is about mutual benefit, and tariffs rise cost, erode trust, and hurt efficiency on both sides. Hopefully, both countries can eventually return to the negotiating table and resolve their differences through dialogue, not through a zero-sum battle where no one truly wins. Well, that's all for this episode, and if you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.